Good evening. Welcome to this evening's newscast on Kaieteur Radio. I am Kevin Smith.
And I am Kayla King.
Before we get to the news in detail, let's get to the front page comment of today's Kaieteur news. Time to end abuse of public funds. The expenses the former minister in the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, Annette Ferguson, is alleged to have incurred on one trip may attempt one to believe that this was in relation to a return trip to the Far East. But Annette Ferguson only went to Wakenham, and that near $1 million was only for this visit. The expenses assault the senses and insult the dignity of all Guyanese. And if no Guyanese is disturbed by this level of extravagance, we at this newspaper and this radio station are offended and outraged. We are sickened because we know where there is smoke, there is bound to be fire, and there may be many more similar circumstances involving others which are yet to be unearthed, or which may never be known. It sets an unhealthy precedent, especially for the present ruling cabal, who may be tempted to believe that, apart from approving contracts to firms owned by their children, they can engage in similar abuse of public funds. On every occasion that public officials, including elected officials, are allowed to escape sanction from financial extravagance, it means less will be available for our policemen, our nurses, and our teachers. With that said, we now head over to Kayla for our news in detail.
And now for heartbreaking news. A 30-year-old Venezuelan mother was on Wednesday last raped, sodomized, and battered as neighbors watched on in horror. Her 3 children, she said, are the reason she kept on fighting. The suspect, Thurston Semple, a taxi driver of Tocqueville, Georgetown, was today taken into police custody. It is understood that the suspect was positively identified by the victim. The taxi driver has had hiccups with the law prior to this incident. Only in 2018, he was arrested and charged on multiple occasions for raping and assaulting 2 sex workers. He was also charged with escaping from police custody in 2017. According to a medical the woman showed us, the woman sustained a fractured rib along with multiple concussions to the head. There were also notable cuts and bruises to her body, along with multiple black and blue marks to her eyes, face, and neck.
And now let's tell you, government's proposed plan to land the gas-to-shore project at Wales would be considered an act of lunacy. So said Shadow Oil and Gas Minister David Patterson. Patterson reported that the coalition, when in office, had conducted several studies pinpointing different sites for the project. Wales, he outlined, was one of the areas examined by a multi-stakeholder group and was not deemed viable, as it would involve placing the gas pipeline at the mouth of one of Guyana's busiest rivers. According to Patterson, the proposed 2023 timeline outlined by government for the project to be completed is hogwash if it's done within acceptable standards. Patterson added that the supply of gas will be interpreted for at least 2 to 3 days yearly to support routine maintenance of the equipment.
Meanwhile, Minister of Natural Resources Vikram Bharat had said in August last year that after the Canadian consult, Alison Redford spearheaded the review of the Payara project, the findings would be made public. 2 weeks after he made that commitment, the Payara Field Development Plan was approved. The approval was announced on September 30th, 2020. The project is slated to come on stream in 2024, producing up to 220,000 barrels of oil a day. The government had published the Payara production license and the environmental permit, but not the findings of the team headed by the controversial Canadian consult, Alison Redford. It has been 5 months since that approval, and the public is still waiting.
And moving on, former Speaker of the House Ralph Ramkaran said that the person holding the office has a duty to stop vulgarity by members of Parliament. This followed a week of vulgar, distasteful remarks made by MPs during their budget speeches and in their heckling of their colleagues when budget debates opened last week. As the week went by, the racism, homophobia, and sexism in MPs' remarks began to abate as Kaieteur reported on it, and the public shamed them in newspapers' letter speeches, as well as on social media. In response, the Speaker, Manzoor Nadir, warned the media about reporting on heckling and told the media that it opened itself to being sued. Ramkaran said that the press is absolutely right to bring this slow descent vulgarity into the public domain and to print it in its disgusting detail.
Meanwhile, governments around the world make big money when they award oil and gas contracts by open, competitive bidding processes. And that is the route the Surinamese government took when it announced in November 2020 that it has 8 oil blocks up for auction. When asked to give some insight on the bidding process, Rodolphe Elias, the chief executive officer of Suriname's state oil company Stadsoli, revealed that it gives preference to those oil companies that propose to make it an operator in 10 years' time. He boasted that despite Stadsoli's strict fixed collections such as its 6% royalty and 36% revenue collections and its 20% participating interest, the state oil company has seen a huge interest from international oil companies looking to secure the 8 blocks.
With that being said, let's tell you the New Amsterdam hospital has once again come under fire after a woman and her baby died following a transfer from the institution to the Georgetown Public Hospital. Relatives have criticized the institution and the medical staff who attended to the pregnant woman, while noting their firm belief that some form of negligence must have taken place on the part of the hospital. Dead is 32-year-old Vanessa Sahadio of Street Williamsburg and her stillborn baby.
And now let's tell you a West Coast Berbice man is now dead following an accident on the number 29 public road, West Coast Berbice. Dead is McKinley Farley, 48 of number 37 Village. It is understood that Farley, who was a pastor and also worked with the Guyana Sugar Corporation East Berbice operations, was riding his motorcycle in an easterly direction on the northern side of the highway when a minibus reportedly moving at a fast rate and proceeding west swerved into his lane while overtaking. Farley was struck and flung off of his motorcycle.
And now let's tell you, even though the draft local content policy categorically calls for the regulator of local content to be free from political interference, there are several conditions which hinder this objective from being fully realized or protected. Now, according to the draft policy, once the Petroleum Commission comes on stream, it would be tasked with implementing the document and its relevant regulations. It would be doing so through a dedicated local content secretariat. That body, however, would be overseen by an interagency coordinating committee. It would be made up of senior officials of the various government ministries and agencies that would be charged by the respective minister to oversee the implementation of the local content policy. It is now 19 hours 8. We now head over to the page 7 of today's Kaieteur News. Kathy Hughes should ensure taxpayers are fully reimbursed with the $6 million she signed away to video mega productions before she musters the audacity to chat to anybody about corruption and holding the PPPC accountable. And with that, we've come to the end of this evening's newscast. I am Kevin Smith.
And I'm Kayla King. Thank you for listening.
Want value for your advertising dollar? Then place your ads on Kaieteur Radio's Newscast.